Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for spending some time with me again today. I am having a conversation with Melanie Pienaar today, who is a fabulous fashion designer from Johannesburg. And I have been mentoring her on the side, particularly around product pricing. And we are unpacking some rather heavy conversations in a very brave way, Melissa. And I thought it would be worth sharing some of them with all of you today who are struggling with your product pricing, because I know that it's a very, very kind of complicated and difficult topic to navigate for most creatives who just wish they could make beautiful things and people would buy them, and they wouldn't have to think about the financial side their business. So, Melissa, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today so that we can maybe talk about some things that will help other people out there who are struggling. So, Melissa, if you can maybe introduce yourself to everybody and just give them some context about who you are and what you're working on and what your biggest struggles are with your product pricing.
Okay, thank you so much, Melanie. It's been really lovely talking to you about the whole process and the products and all that. But to get into my introduction, I'm Melanie Brummer, the founder of The Stitch, and we are gearing ourselves up to be able to train fashion designers and train CMT sewers. That's kind of where we're aiming towards for now. We are doing some workshops, so we're doing some fun things on the side as well. We've got some workshops coming up, so Felting Cute, where we just create some really interesting little things out of felt. We can make them into purses, felt, keyrings, and all those things anyway. We also do offer couture. I found a lot of my product pricing problems are in the couture realm, and that's quite a hectic thing to navigate, especially being a designer. And also, I started this all very young. So I started fashion design when I was 16, and I've just been winging it my whole time until this point. So it's been very interesting, to say the least. Learned a lot, and I find the more I've grown as a person and a designer, I found that pricing is really a thing I think creators struggle with because we put so much of our self-worth into it.
Mm,
We tend to feel it's a value system, and it's so hard to break something that you're so passionate about and you're so in love with. It's hard to be like,
mm,
okay, now you have to pay me.
mm,
um
mm,
so
mm.
yeah, it's been an interesting journey until this point. And yeah, I'm excited to hopefully share or spare some heartache in the pricing part of fashion design, because or creative, actually just creative in general. So yeah, a bit of more or less here and there about me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that, Melissa. I so appreciate that you're willing to have this conversation because I think the things that we're going to talk about today are universal to many creatives out there. And I think this conversation is going to be very valuable to all of them. So you've mentioned that your biggest challenge is around couture pricing. What have your biggest challenges been? Can you describe them for us?
Okay, so there's a ton of layers here. I struggled in the beginning with working out the right amount of fabric trims or the right costing for what the garment's going to actually cost me.
Yes.
I struggled with that a lot because also it's one of those things, it's so hard to price something when you have to know the full cost of it. But if
Mm,
you don't know the full cost of it, how are you going to charge for it? So
yes.
I've been finding that, and that's where things like Trello and invoicing, apps and stuff like that, where you can keep record of these things, comes so handy. Where
Mm,
for a lot of my life, I just did it on Excel, and
mm,
then I'd for some reason just go over it. I would never save it. I didn't think that was a thing I needed to do. And then sometimes it was just WhatsApp, like how much for this WhatsApp? Here's my details. They pay me. I didn't keep a record, so recording your stuff I think is one. Knowing how much to charge and always just charge extra. It feels it for a while it felt wrong for me. But what I do is I charge like a 30% extra, and then I charge a miscellaneous, because there's always something I don't know that I'm going to need, or
Mm.
I'm going to break more needles on this one, because we're also using sequins over satin. So, and also we all know needles pricing ranges from. So I found that just charging that little bit extra helped. So definitely costing in just the raw cost, and then costing
Mm.
my value or costing my labor. Now that was a tricky one, because so I remember the first time I kind of worked out how much I was charging per hour. I can't even remember whether it must have been like early 2000s, but I I was charging 37 Rand an hour for couture. And I mean, it must have been like 18, 19. So anyway, we can always work that out if I tell you my age. But I think back, I'm like 37 Rand an hour. And then I start thinking about what I was being paid then, but then also what some of the laborers are being paid now. And I'm like, I thought 37 Rand is crazy then, but some people be getting paid that now.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a different discussion. But yeah, I started at 37 Rand an hour. I've at least upped my rates to now 160 Rand an hour sometimes, especially for couture. And
Mm.
even that, like, it's still not there, but it's a value thing for me. So I found that I don't value myself enough to charge higher than what I should be, or like, what is that thing that I just can't. Every time I try to charge more, like, I feel sick to my stomach. I'm just like, oh, they're
Mm.
never going to pay this.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that starts trickling down, and it's such a weird thing to say, because most people would just say that's the price. You don't
Mm.
go to a petrol and be like, how much for petrol? And you're like, oh, that's ridiculous. You just pay it.
Yes.
We all know it's
Yes.
ridiculous, but it's something you have to pay. But
Yes.
yeah, so that's an interesting part of it. So yeah, I think couture was sort
Do
of like
you
a
think
level thing.
maybe people don't just pay it because it's an optional purchase and not a must
Mm,
have. So we need bread and food and
absolutely.
fuel, but couture really is a nice to have.
It's
And
luxury. It's definitely a more of a luxury thing. It's not.
yes,
No one, no one's going to miss anything if you don't have a dress. But in that sense, we're also selling a moment, and I think that's kind of where I've almost put myself into now. Is like, where are you wearing the dress to? Okay,
yes,
we're wearing a dress to my birthday party. What do you want to look like? Okay, I want to feel fabulous. I want to feel sexy. I want to, I want to have all the feels.
yes,
But then you're kind of selling the moment, and how much does that headache or how much does that moment mean to you? And
yes,
that's where I started kind of shifting as to what am I selling when, and it's kind of felt easier to start thinking about charging. Although I'm taking a break from couture, so I just needed that one out there. But just to reevaluate what I'm selling and try to price it in the right framework, I think.
yes,
Um,
yes,
because yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one when you're creative. You just want to make all the cool clothes and don't worry about money.
yes, yes. So here in the conversation, I'd just like to touch on something that you've mentioned, is all of those
Mm,
feelings that come with the process. So
mm,
I think that one of the problems for a lot of creatives is they want to just grab a formula, especially if somebody can say, okay, you just take this much and you times it by 3 and you're there.
yeah,
Uh, and they don't realize that pricing is not a moment in time of saying this is a price and sticking to it. For most creatives, there's an emotional process that goes along with it. And until you bring your emotions along, you you cannot be comfortable with charging your price. So I know
absolutely.
that between you and me, we've been working together on this pricing thing for you for months now. And that during that time, I remember after one of our first conversations, you went completely silent, air silence. It was like I thought I'd lost you. And then you came
Done.
back and you said, well, actually, I had to go and do some personal work. I had to go do some deep digging. There had to be like almost some psychological work that you had to do to bring yourself along to be ready to charge more. And
Yeah,
I think it's that's the hard part for creatives.
It's very uncomfortable. It is so uncomfortable. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'd be like scrubbing a stove because I don't know what to do, or like that sick feeling at just, what is it? Like, what? Because I think I got so burnt out from also undercharging, trying to keep the studio open, having to buy, there's always something, oh man, list goes on. But just to keep afloat, it was so hard. I was working weekends, I was working days, and then also in the stage when there was load shedding, then trying to work in between schedules, trying to just make the best I can with the time or whatever resources I have, because also resources here is such a mission. Like,
Mm,
try to find the right color zips. Like, I'd be out for days, just days, fabric sourcing.
mm,
And if I'm still the one who has to sew it, where where and how do I do this? So you start becoming so exhausted and you think, why am I doing this? And I remember sitting and I was sewing, and I felt like I was just crying and just like, where has this all gone wrong?
yes,
Like, I didn't sign
yes,
up for this. I didn't sign up to sit at 2 o'clock in the morning crying, thinking I don't want to sew anymore. And like, I love sewing. I love the
yes,
creating. That's my passion. I've always had this thing about fashion and how exciting it is, and the journeys you go with so many people. It's not even just the people who help you; it's the people that you making this garment for, and like how they feel in it. So it's such a cool thing to experience with someone. But I got to the point where I just hated it. And that was, I think after that is when I reached out to you and I was like, okay, something's gonna change because like I'm not doing this anymore. And then you hit me with that of like, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was something about what do you want? And I was like, I can't tell you. And then you start thinking about your self-worth and like, what kind of lifestyle do you want? And then you start thinking about, I'm not pricing myself because I don't have the lifestyle I want. Although I'm sewing, yay, but I'm still don't have a life. I don't have friends. I don't have, weekends off for work kind of thing. So you start evaluating yourself very differently and evaluating what you are doing.
mm,
You can
mm,
have a passion for sewing, but it still has to be a business.
mm,
And you
mm,
have to think about it as you. And the one thing I remember someone telling me, from then, that's actually why I changed the name. It was Melly Couture because it was about me, but I distanced myself from that. So I disconnected my ego from the sewing. So I then became the stitch. And after that, I felt so much easier to charge because it's not me.
yes,
So I also find it very difficult, and it's something hard to explain to someone that when you're sewing for yourself, they're coming to you. So you have to deal with everything. You have to deal with the money. You have to deal, and that becomes very exhausting. But
yes,
if you can distance yourself from that and you are not your business, and you can start having maybe someone help you, get your mom to help you with finance, or you know distance yourself from that so you can just focus on what you need to do as a business and a designer, because to do it
yes,
all in one goes also. And I think that's when we get overtired and overstimulated, and then we have to charge, and then we're feeling so low already, we
yes,
can't charge what we're charging because there's so
yes.
much. If someone told me this, I would have maybe thought about a few things differently.
Okay.
um,
Okay. So if you could have a conversation with your younger self, what would you tell her about product pricing?
it's got nothing to do with you. It's got absolutely nothing to do with you. Um, this is just the outcome.
Mm,
As much as they praise you and you love it, it's nothing to do with you. And just charge more. If you think that you've undercharged, just put it up by like 10%, as you said.
yes.
And I went and I took all my little things and I put them in different line items on QuickBooks, and I went 10%, and I was like, I feel better. And I do think it's a bit of a process. So for some of us that maybe aren't feeling quite brave enough to just, shoot for the stars, and we steadily climbing, I think the 10% is great. And every couple of months, you just put another 10% in there. And as soon as you know it, you'll probably start feeling like you can, because 10% makes a little difference. I mean,
Yes.
it
Yes.
really, it was small enough to not feel like overpowering, but enough to make me feel like, yeah, okay, I can go and do this with that little bit extra.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah,
So it was a very important lesson that I learned in my 20s. So my solution in my 20s for undercharging was to work all-nighters. I would
yeah,
typically work right through the night on a Thursday night every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that might sound far-fetched, but it was my reality for a decade. And I just threw myself in the gap. I was like, if I work harder, everything will be okay. And you don't
Yeah.
realize that it is unsustainable. And at the end of it, you burn out, and then everybody around you suffers. Everyone around you who you care about suffers, because then they
Yeah.
have to look after you. They'll have the worst version of you to live with. And you're broke.
Yeah.
You're relying on them
Yeah.
financially suddenly. So it's not a healthy way of doing it. And when I was at the flea market selling tie-dyed t-shirts, I had to learn a couple of things. I firstly had to learn that I couldn't take too long with the thing. If it was a design that I couldn't make within a certain time frame, I had to ditch it. Because no one was going to pay me more for a t-shirt. There's an upper limit to what people are prepared to pay for a t-shirt, no matter how much you throw at it, or how special your technique is, or if you're the only person in the world who can do that technique. Nobody cares, because they will only pay a certain amount for a t-shirt, especially when they can walk into a retail store and buy a similar t-shirt that will do a similar job, cheap as chips. The other,
Absolutely.
the other thing that I learned was at one stage, I had a lot of people come to me in my stand and ask me for discounts. And I would normally respond very badly when they did, because I felt I was charging them a fair price. So I'd get all offended and offensive, and then they'd leave and not come back and buy from me ever again, which also wasn't a great strategy. So I one day got very brave, and I added 10% across the board to all my prices. I said, okay, I'm going to put a 10% discount margin into what I'm doing. It then meant that when people came into my stand and said to me, can I have a discount? I'd say to them very graciously, you can have 10%, which normally appeases an average buyer. And they were quite happy to, they were like, oh, that's amazing. Thank you for the discount. They felt like they got what they'd wanted in their negotiation. They left happy customers. And what I learned from that was that, the people who didn't ask for a discount were quite happy to pay the extra 10%. And that then gave me some fat in my business for growth.
Mm.
Because selling at a fair price very often doesn't give your business space to grow. It also
Yeah.
doesn't give you space when things go wrong.
Yeah. Because that's the thing you sort of almost don't think about in the moments, is like when your overlocker breaks, or when your iron gives stuff, or there's always something that you have to do. There's always something you need to service. Every couple of months something's going to happen, and if you don't have that little bit extra to have that fun, it's so hard, because then I feel like you're always pedaling and you get something else and you're working till 2 o'clock in the morning because you really need the money to be able to fix the overlocker that you need, or you start sort of just grasping on straws. And then I find in those moments are the moments where I'll take on almost anything. I'll
Yes,
take on the ridiculous jobs that I know I shouldn't, but
yes,
I think I should because I need the money. And
yes,
then that goes into a vicious cycle, because then I lower my lower, I want to say lower my worth, but not really worth, but I lower myself to be able to
mm,
accommodate what my client wants. And then that's their standard.
mm,
So
mm,
how then do you go above that without, because I find also sometimes when I have done my price increases, I've seen a lot of people leave, but I have seen some of my clients stay, which I'm very grateful for. And so when you set yourself very low, it's so hard to get above that, because you know you need the money and you're just surviving. So but to jump this extra jump to get to where you're surviving and have a little bit of savings, it feels impossible.
yes,
And before you get yourself in those loops, been
yes.
there many a time. I'm trying to break it out of me now. 16 years we've been doing the same loop. So let's break it.
Don't
But yeah,
feel,
so I think,
yes.
mm, I
Don't
was
feel
like,
bad about how long it's taking you, Melissa. Some people don't get there in a lifetime. Don't be tough on yourself. So you're already
yeah,
being tough enough
yeah.
on yourself Don't beat yourself up even more.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yes, yes. The real financial difficulties that you have gone through are tough enough that you don't have to punish yourself some more. So
Yeah.
what's very interesting was many years ago, I joined a business incubator. And I'll never forget, I spent the one day with my finance guide there, and I went home and I was crying. And I cried for days. I really cried for days. And one of my friends looked at me and said to me, like, why are you putting yourself through this process? Why do you even go back there when you come home and weep all the time? Like, this makes no sense. And I said to her, you know what? I'm not crying about what they have said to me. I'm crying about the years and years that I've spent punishing myself because I didn't learn enough about this.
Yeah.
And I think that's the
Very much.
discomfort that we sit with when we start to
Mm.
really get into the pricing conversation, is not that this is so difficult to hear, which it totally is, but that deep realization in your heart that all the suffering you've had has been self-inflicted. It
Yeah.
was a choice.
But
And you,
that's the thing. I keep saying, like, are you crazy? Like, am I mad? Why do I keep doing this to myself? Like, we should be doing this better. We know we should be charging more, and we all know this. But doing is a very different thing.
mm, mm.
And yeah, it's a thing. But we do it to ourselves. It's all choices we make. Absolutely. Like, come now. Stick in here. We'll be fine.
You're making huge, huge progress, because
Mm.
I feel you're making huge progress because you're already shifting from couture, which is a space where there's a ceiling to how much money you can make because it's linked to how many hours in the day you can work. And there's also a very small number of aspirational customers who can truly afford what you do. Most people want couture at a budget price. There's only a very, very tiny number of people who are prepared and able to pay for couture at what it's worth.
Absolutely.
So you're already making wiser choices because you're removing yourself from that very small market that's capped and moving yourself into a space of training where you could train bigger groups, where you
Mm.
can get funding for training, um, and where your time is not capped, your income is not capped by the time you have in your day. It is to a
Yeah.
degree because there are only so many workshops you can teach, but you can always bring more students into your workshops. And you can
Mm.
also turn your workshops into digital content that you could then sell in other ways.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the thing, like, I think also is like understanding like there is only so many things you can do a day. And is it worth doing it at this level? Or is there something else in the thing that you are excited about or the thing that you enjoy that you can scale? Because there's many ways that we can scale things. How difficult they are is each to their own. But I think if you can find something that is your bread and butter and that you can have your, because I've been very interested in this 80/20, and where 80% is say the classes or the workshops or something that I can at least brings me bread and butter and I can scale very easily, well, easily, very confident there. And then I can do higher end couture. So higher end, it could be bridal or it could be performance wear. I can find my own niche within the designing that I want to do, because as a
yeah,
designer, when you are making for other people, you're making what they want.
yes, yes,
So whether you like the style, whether you don't like the style, whatever, like you're dealing with different fabrics, you're dealing with different fits, and then they still want them to look like the Pinterest model that they've just sent you a picture of, and you're like, So you work with so many variables there, but is it what you want to sew? Or is it what you want it to be as a designer? And think about that. So find the thing that you can scale, whether it's fashion collections or whatever, teaching someone sewing, whatever that is, try to find that first and then go back into your sort of fashion designing kind of world, because it's extremely hard with the amounts of designers that are out there currently to find your
Mm,
space. And
yes.
if you are wanting to find your space, you have to work very hard at it and for a very long time before you get to the level that you need to be. And you need to be seen. So, you're going to have to do social content. So, it's a very different world depending on where you're going as well.
Yes. Do you think that fashion designers in this country are given enough information about pricing in their courses that they do?
I don't think so, because the the base level of like a normal dress, so say we're looking at a bridesmaid's dress, it used to be about 3,000 rand, and I've seen it become about it's 800 to 1,000 rand a bridesmaid's dress.
Oh,
So when I was doing bridesmaids dresses, my cap was 3,000 rand. And
yes,
I haven't had many brides dresses for a while because I've also upped that price because it's a lot of work.
yes,
And I've been seeing a lot of people are more prepared to pay 1,000, yeah, 800 rand to 1,000 rand for a bridesmaid's dress now. So anyone that's in the bridesmaid industry or making bridesmaids dresses has to compete with this. A
yes,
thousand, so like 1,000 rand a dress. How?
yes, yes,
Who
yes,
how can you? And if you are, you're not making enough money to really sustain yourself, because how much would you make on it? So, and that most of the time, the crazy thing is that includes fabric.
yes,
So
yes,
we still have to spend maybe say 300 rand. So you're making 700 rand, and you're probably going to spend about a week on it
yes,
between fittings and fabric shopping and all that. So like,
yes,
so I've seen what people are willing to pay for in the general, and this is sort of like middle class kind of a thing, is very low. And I do think it's because of, Sheen and Timu and all those fun things. But
yes,
the and people who are willing to spend higher amounts generally seem to stay in the bridal side. So I think
yes,
anyone that's willing and then you're competing with all the bridal shops. So I think there's so much to navigate when being a designer in South Africa, and you need to find where you think you can create value and try stay in a niche, because to fluctuate up and down and you're competing with Tani Sari down the road and this,
yes,
it's not worth competing in those realms where you're
yes,
spending a week and you're getting 700 rand.
yes, yes,
It's below minimum wage, which is the craziest part. And I've seen
yes,
so many people do this,
yes,
which, yeah. So I think they really need to think about where they want to go as far as fashion goes, because there's many places to go, but we need to be realistic in what's in South Africa.
yes,
And I think if you can build a name for yourself really early on, really stick it into content and find your space, then I think you've got a winning recipe. But find your market first and then
yes,
figure out what to do in the design space, I think, is
yes,
what I would have told myself that, because I was trying to fly in here left and right center, like doing all the crazy things, and I never found a niche. I just made what people came to me with, and it could be anywhere from drum bags. I made drum bags in my life before. I've made car seat covers. I've done like wedding dresses. You know what I mean? So kind of
yes,
whatever, whoever came to me with a sewing problem, I just solved it.
mm,
But
mm,
you're
mm,
competing with a very, very I was trying to find the word now. But yeah, very competitive market, I suppose, in a low
yes,
low competitive market.
yes.
Um,
A lot
so
of designers make the mistake of going, okay, I'm going to get work by just undercutting everybody else. And they don't realize that it's actually a race to the bottom. You're dragging the
absolutely.
entire industry down. You're going to eventually burn out. And as a
Always.
result, you're going to change the expectation of the market and you're going to kill everybody around you. Everybody
That's what
leaves.
I've seen. I've seen when people have been undercutting and trying to do things very cheaply because they have a sewing machine at home and they think, let me rephrase that. They feel it's an easy thing, an easy profession to go into, because I don't think it's a very easy profession. I think to be a good designer, it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication, and pattern making and the thought process in fashion design is hectic. But when people have been undercutting fashion and can make dresses for 1,500 and all those kind of things, now our market, and because of those things, and I can see how it works out. So they charge these undercut prices, they burn themselves out, their work isn't where it should be. Now dressmakers have a bad name. Now,
Yes,
no one wants to go to a dressmaker because they'd rather buy something because they know what they're getting.
yes,
There's our problem now. So now and I've had to convince people to use my services and be like, this is my work and I haven't missed the deadline. And I'll sew till 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll sew throughout till you have to collect your dress to get it finished. So you'll never have that problem. But because of past experiences of so and so and so and so that have had bad experiences with dressmakers,
mm,
all of us get a bad name. And I
yes,
have seen that more people just want to buy dresses because they don't want the hassle of fitting. They don't want the hassle of who knows what it's going to look like in the end. They don't want that
yes,
surprise. They want to go, know what they're buying, and leave. And then
yes.
probably come to us for alterations. And alterations just, I don't know if they're worth it. Just saying.
I think
I
maybe
mean,
if you're altering corporate clothes for corporates who have a clothing budget and need to show up looking a certain way, and they're simple
yeah,
alterations like shortening the hems on trousers and fixing zips and things, I think you've got an okay
you're
chance.
fine.
But
Yeah.
if it's anything very complicated or kind of bespoke, it
Oh.
sounds like the road to hell.
It is because you don't know how things have been made before, and then I've done it where the dress kept pulling skew, and then I try to fix it, and the more I fix it, the more it just went skewer, and I'm like, oh, and then it becomes my problem because
Yes.
I said I'll alter it. So no, no, just don't do
Everybody
alterations
listen to
unless you
this.
find your
Listen
niche.
to this.
Yeah, if anything, just don't do bridal alterations. People that do it for a living, that's their thing, but just don't take it on if you're a fashion designer. It's not worth
Yes.
it.
So, Melissa, we have just over 5 minutes left. Time flies when you're having fun. Um, what has been the toughest part of your pricing journey so far?
Um, I think it was an internal thing. Definitely the self-worth. I think that
Mm,
was the toughest one to get over, and a little bit of the ego. I think I still had a very much me, myself, and I kind of thought process.
mm,
Um, so I think letting that go and understanding what I want from my business and what I want it to start looking like, so it's bigger than me, has
mm,
shifted how I make my decisions and how I start directing or navigating myself towards. Because it's not about me, which is actually quite a nice thing. um, yeah, so I think a little bit was the self-worth, I think was the hardest one for me. It took me a
yes.
couple of months.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
It takes many of us a lifetime. I still sometimes struggle with it, and I'm in my 50s. So
And yeah,
I don't, I
I
don't know
don't
if
even
that's
think
going
I'm
to
near
make
your
you feel
place.
any better.
I don't think it's an ever it's not a problem that's ever going to go away, but I do think understanding it and feeling more accepting of the journey, it makes it easier. Like it's because I always think you're always going to be growing, you're always going to be finding that next thing, and but I think it's a good start, and I think just shifting your mindset is probably one of the big wins.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to thank you for having this really honest conversation. I think it's going to be super helpful. I know I've got a lot of people who are making things that they want to sell in our network who are struggling with very similar things to what we've spoken about today. So I'm super thankful to you for your time today, that you've so generously given to share your experience so that maybe some other designers out there can be spared some of the heartache after listening to you. So thank you so much, Melissa, for this. I appreciate it very much. For those of you who are watching, if you have any more questions for us, please add them in the comments below this video. And we will also add all of Melissa's links in the comments to this video. And I will also add some useful links for you to my Pricing Your Products group on Facebook and my little online course that I can have, that you can sign up for if you are feeling brave enough to tackle your pricing head on. So thank you to all of you, and thank you for watching.